After riding around the country of Laos for about 3.5 weeks, we finally made our way down to the very southerly portion of the country. Here it would be a much anticipated visit to the 4,000 Islands. This is an area where the Mekong River gets fragmented into numerous channels as it goes through a very rocky area. This not only creates numerous islands, it also creates waterways that were basically impassable to shipping traffic. Our plan was to make our way to the islands of Don Con and Don Det, where we understood there was some very interesting things to experience. We also understood there would be a confusing ferry ride to get us over to there, so we were a little surprised when navigation took us across a bridge instead.
That's a pretty easy ferry.
Very easy. What a bridge.
Fantastic.
Nice to see the river again.
We are on the islands.
Just like that. Soon we clarified the confusion when we realized that our intent of going to Don Con, shown here on the bottom of this map, got a little derailed with a typo that made it Don Kong, which is the large island you see up to the north part of this map. And therein lies the beauty of unscripted, seat-of-the-pants kind of travel when you don't really have a fixed schedule or itinerary. Turned out our little navigation blunder worked out fine. Gave us an opportunity to explore this island that we may well have skipped otherwise. We made our way north along the Mekong River channel into this little town of Muon Con. Turned out to be a really fun place. Nice guest house there on the left, and right across from it was this wonderful little restaurant right out on the river. There was a small farmer's market we just passed through, plus a crafts fair up ahead. This restaurant was not only convenient, it was a really cool place. Had this deck that went right out onto the riverbank. You could kind of watch the world go by. In the evenings, the fishermen would come out on their little boats and they would cast their nets out and bring in fish. This scene kind of cracked me up when I realized that this boat was using a 5-gallon water jug as its fuel tank. After grabbing some dinner at this nearby restaurant, we went out to explore the little town a bit. Even made our way through a carnival celebration that was going on, but there wasn't enough common language to ever figure out what this represented. There was also a Buddhist temple close by that was particularly interesting to check out during the darkness of evening. Later that evening, back at the guest house, we saw a familiar sight with these little geckos running up and down the walls and across the ceilings. The following morning, I was treated to a beautiful sunrise over the Mekong as I sat out on the guest house balcony sipping coffee and watching the day start to unfold. This even included the familiar sight of the Buddhist monks beginning to make their rounds with their bowls in search of food. Once we got our day rolling, it was time to take advantage of our unanticipated visit to the big island of Don Kong and explore around a bit. Turned out to be a really nice place, a little more upscale in infrastructure and houses than many of the rural parts of Laos that we had been visiting. Most of the numerous islands in this area are only accessible by boat, but some of these more densely populated ones actually have bridges that provide access. After casually riding around and checking out the sights further, thought it was time to try to make our way south and get down to the intended islands of Don Con and Don Det. We identified a promising looking boat dock area on Don Con, so we decided to make our way there and see if we could find a ferry that would get us down south. As it turns out, there was nothing really conveniently scheduled that would get us there in a reasonable time, so had to come up with another plan. At this point, the easiest approach was just to go back out to the Highway 13, the yellow line you see there, and make our way down to the little town of Nakasang, where we could catch a ferry over to Dondet. Didn't take long to make our way down to Nakasang, and there we found quite the bustling little town. This had to be the busiest river port that we had encountered on our entire trip through Laos. And there were so many boats out there. We could see why it was said to be a confusing ferry ride. Ended up stumbling around for a while and just decided to make my way down to the beach here and see if I could learn something. As dumb luck would have it, that boat straight ahead is the ferry that was going to take us out to Dondet. We pulled up at exactly the right time. It was a nice-sized ferry boat that was able to accommodate our 3 motorcycles and a number of other passengers as we made our way toward Dondet. After about a 20-minute ride on the ferry boat, we arrived at the Dondet Pier, and we could quickly see how developed the area was, with restaurants and bars and guest houses all right along the river in quite the busy little area. This island was said to have a bit of a backpacker vibe to it. I guess I would also say kind of a bohemian feel as well. Our initial effort was to scout around the island a bit and try and decide where there could be a guest house we'd want to stay. We ended up coming back there to the pier and got us rooms at Johnny's guest house. And right next to it is Johnny's restaurant, which turned out to be a really cool place. This wonderful deck there on the river, you could sit and watch all the traffic go by, and there was scarcely a moment where there wasn't boats to be seen, including cargo boats. When you think of it, everything out there on those islands has got to be brought in. The yellow crates were a familiar sight all over Laos, everywhere we went. These are what delivers the beer Lao, the country's official beer, probably owned by the state. It all makes for a pretty serious beer run, Dondet style. Once we got settled in at Johnny's, we left the bikes and went out to explore the town a bit. Certainly its share of tourist activities. Here you see some tours that get you around Laos and over to Cambodia and even Thailand. All of the commercial activity on the islands was pretty much concentrated there around the pier. We found so many bars and restaurants all along the way. This one turned out to be a favorite, the Reggae Bar. Definitely had the whole Marley vibe going on. Even the guy behind the bar seemed to be an authentic Jamaican. The whole place had the real vibe to it, pretty much all ways. A noteworthy discovery and a word to the wise, many places had menus that had items on it, and then it would have the same item with the word happy in front of it for a few dollars more. You always want to ask your server what special ingredient is added to make these things happy. To borrow a phrase, what happens in Dondet stays in Dondet. I really enjoyed the evenings when the sun would go down and the whole vibe would mellow out. As I was editing this video, I realized you can hear the ice clinking around in my cocktail as I'm walking down the way. Enjoyed the nice quiet evening with the little streets clearing out, Johnny's being real quiet. It's a nice time though just to sit and look at the lights and how different things are at night. But it did start to pick up. When I first saw this cat that seemed to live there at Johnny's, I thought it got its tail severely caught in a door. But then I started seeing others with that same short tail with the crook in it. Turns out it's the Mekong bobtail. It's a very common thing in Southeast Asia, and it is the most common domestic cat. It turned out Johnny was actually a U.S. citizen as well, and he would spend about half the year working in the U.S., and it was clear that his wife was the one who was running this whole establishment. I never actually did catch her name, but she certainly was pleasant to be around. One evening she turned us on to this crazy-looking fruit that was actually quite tasty. First guess it might have been a durian, but those are said to have a terrible smell and oftentimes banned for consumption in public. So this wasn't one of those, I don't think. I always enjoy the mornings, kicking back when it's quiet. In this case, Johnny's was a perfect spot. Cup of coffee, sit there and watch as the river starts to come to life and the day starts to unfold. Members of the backpacker community are certainly a common sight around Laos. They're generally 20-somethings, and they're out on extended travel for months, years sometimes, different parts of the world, traveling on the cheap. Don Det was certainly one of their local destinations here in Laos. Once out and away from that commercial area near the pier, there were guest houses here and there, but largely it was just a community where people lived. Here's the little schoolhouse for the kids, and these are the buses that go out and collect them up each day. You see the fuzzy-looking line that goes down between these two islands. Starts at the top up by the pier where we're staying, and then down Don Det, jumps across a bridge, and then over down through Don Con to the very southerly part. Well, that symbol is for a railway. The historic route of the long ago abandoned railway is used today as this excellent concrete surface road that lets you get out and about and explore both of these islands. In addition to the tuk-tuk traffic, there's also a good number of folks out on rented bicycles and mopeds. As we approached the crossover between Don Det and Don Con, the channel became fairly narrow. An expensive physical connection between the islands was created, specifically as a railroad bridge. It's a sturdy structure that's in great shape, and it gets plenty of use today.
Sabadi.
I somehow managed to leave my GoPro back at the guest house, so yeah, that's my finger in the upper right portion of the frame. As I was holding my phone videoing this thing, trying to be careful not drop it or fire over the edge of this bridge with no guardrails. Interesting structure, and as I said, it's well used today to connect these two islands and to get us all the way down to the very south part of this thing and explore the railway a little further. In the late 1800s, like 1860s and 70s, the colonial race was on, and France was eagerly trying to get ships through the 4,000 island area to make their way up the Mekong to claim lands before the British got to them first. The basic conclusion was you couldn't get a boat through there. Those channels are so rocky with waterfalls and so disrupted that wasn't possible, even though one Norwegian sailor did manage to get up there in some ridiculous, heroic, multi-week effort. Finally got a boat through, but it wasn't practical for everyday use. That view right there across the channel is of Cambodia, from down here at the very south end of the Don Con Island and the end of this railroad route. So it was here we saw the solution that the French came up with to do shipping past this difficult area of the 4,000 islands. Just beyond the bicycle, you see a little shack, and then to the left is a tree seemingly coming out of the ground. Well, it turns out this was the facility for loading boats up onto the railway. There was an engine source inside the little room, and then these pulleys would go down with cables and drag the ship up and put it on rail cars. Here's an example of a ship. In this case, it had to be disassembled into like 5 pieces because it couldn't fit on a rail car. And as you see there, there's people that are pulling the thing. It was manually towed across the two islands till it got to the north end, up near the Dondet Pier, and the ships would be put in the water or reassembled and put in the water, and then continue their journey northward up the Mekong. Just before the turn of the century, the rail system was upgraded by replacing human power with some steam locomotives. But ultimately, the railroad was made obsolete when in 1937, roads were completed that essentially bypassed that 4,000 island area. We also noticed that southerly portion of Don Con has available dolphin watching, although we didn't see anyone going out in the little boats at that time. As we made our way back north through Don Con, came upon one of those funny little sights. A cafe along the river. Wasn't a lot going on there, but it was a great little spot to stop and have a cold bevy. As we made our way north on the Don Con Island, we came to a place where we could get out and take a good look at the difficult conditions that the 4,000 islands create for shipping. Leading out into the rocky areas of the channel and the waterfalls are these great walkway facilities. A good portion of it are these fixed, sturdy, rigid walkways, but there's also these suspended ones that are essentially cables that have a floor you walk on and fencing on the side so you don't fall out. Very good. Walking across them is really a kick as they swing and sway around, even the short ones, but these long ones really got you rocking. Once we made our way out to this waterfall area, it became immediately obvious how getting boats through this type of terrain would be essentially impossible. It took all the zoom power of my phone camera to take a peek at this bird out here sitting on a rock, probably waiting for a meal to come by. But the scale of this waterfall area really puts it into perspective. Towards the latter part of a longer trip, I've always enjoyed finding a place to stay a few days and get a chance to relax and unwind, reset. The 4,000 Islands in Dondet was most certainly that. Super interesting place. Greatly enjoyed it. I would recommend it to anyone who finds himself in the area.